we are about to get right into our first panel. So this is going to be the Intersectionality panel talk. I'm going to quickly introduce everybody one by one. So yeah, we're going to get started. Hello. Hello. Okay, so give us your name, pronouns, and any identities that you would like to share.
My name is my pronouns are he, they. I'm a queer, trans, disabled guy.
Yeah, welcome.
Hey.
Right. Welcome. Again, name, pronouns, any identities that you would like to share.
Hello, my name is V. Ramos. My pronouns are they, them, ella. I am Indigenous, I am Bame, I am queer, I am asexual, and pansexual. All the identities, and I'm happy to be here.
Welcome. All right, same thing. Name, pronouns, any identities that you would like to share.
Hi, my name is Genesis. I go by she and he pronouns. I am a BIPOC, Indigenous, autistic, plural artist, organizer, speaker, and activist.
Welcome, welcome. All right, so we have a couple of community agreements to go over real quick. We're also still waiting on one person, so he should be here in just a minute. But first, we'll go over community agreements. Just a couple of things so that this talk stays respectful. Please, if you have something to say, maybe just raise your hand. This isn't Zoom, so there's no like virtual raise your hand option, but maybe just like hook your hand up a little bit to be like, hey, I have something to say. Another thing that one of my friends and I do is like we'll just touch our nose. So you can do that if you want to. So just no speaking over each other. Please keep an open mind. We are gender diverse, but we are also diverse in our opinions and our beliefs. So everyone may not have the same ideas about everything as each other. So just be respectful of each other's opinions. If you have a counter to it, then that is absolutely welcome. Just don't start yelling at someone, essentially. And then lastly, don't make assumptions. Ask for clarification on what someone said before assuming that they mean something negative by it. Cool. And does anybody have anything else that they would like to add to the community agreements, or does that pretty much cover it? Pretty good. Okay, cool. I'm gonna get started, and whenever our final panelist joins, we'll just add him in. So first things first, we have an icebreaker. So would you rather have a pause or a rewind button for your life? And I'm gonna start it off with Emrys, and whenever you're ready, go ahead and popcorn it to somebody else.
Okay. Pause, I think. I don't generally want to rewind things just because I'm the person I am because of all the stuff that went before. So, but pausing something to go, oh, I could just go and find that out or calm down. Or so, yes, I think I would rather have a pause. And I will pop that next over to Genesis.
I'm pause. Yeah, my life just feels like it comes at me so fast. Like it would be nice to just be like, stop and let me breathe for a second. And on to V.
Hi. Yeah, I saw these questions yesterday and I thought I was set on one, but I was reflecting and I've been doing a really good job at pausing the last 3 years of my life. So I think I'm going to go with rewind so that I could tell my younger self to pause when I was younger. Yeah, so.
I love that. Yeah, I'm kind of.
We're all pause.
Yeah, I'm kind of. I definitely need time to pause. I do too many things, and everyone tells me I need to just slow down and take a break, and I don't really have time to take a break. So pause button would be great. But also, there are parts of my life that I would love to rewind and like relive again. So I don't know. I'm really 50-50 with that one myself. Given the actual chance, like if it wasn't hypothetical, I would probably go with pause. So I think I'm kind of with all of you on that one. All right, so we're gonna get started with questions. The first one is, how do you define intersectionality and what does it mean to you? This time I'm gonna start with V, and again, we'll just keep doing the popcorn thing.
I was like, man, I hope I don't go first on any of these. It's okay. So the way that I would define intersectionality is acknowledging and honoring the different parts of me along with my experiences and how those continually change over time. And so what that means to me is reflecting often on the past and the journey, and all the different, not just my own identities, but other people's identities and how those have impacted me, right, to be who I am now. So I think intersectionality is not just an individual experience. It's a whole, in social work, we have a term, it's a biopsychosocial experience, right? It's biological, it's environmental, it's social. And yeah, that's what it means to me.
We'll go ahead and popcorn it over to someone.
Well, then Genesis.
For me, intersectionality is realizing that we don't live in boxes or bubbles. Like, people are unique, our lived experiences are valid, and everyone, I think almost everyone experiences intersectionality, even if they don't know it, even if they aren't aware of it.
I had never thought of that before, but I definitely agree with that. All right, and Emrys?
Oh, and on to Emrys.
That's right. I mean, I think similar to Genesis, it's the idea that we're not monoliths. It's that, that there are things that there are lots of other trans people can do that I can't do as a disabled person. There are so it's that thing of just being aware and like having the thought possibility of things not applying to a group of people en masse.
Yeah,
would be my definition, I think.
Definitely. And what do you wish people knew about the intersection between your specific identities? So each of you went ahead and shared a little bit about what you identified as beforehand. We'll start with Genesis this time. What do you wish people knew about your specific identities and the intersection between those?
I have a lot of identities that people literally know nothing about, or what they do know is all stereotypes. So a lot of my work is educational, and I wish people knew, especially in leftist circles, I hear a lot of people say things like, it's not my job to educate you. And while that is true, I wish people would understand that when you have so many identities that people literally know nothing about, you are forced to be that educator. And so it might not be my job, but I have to do it. And I wish other progressive, leftist people would hold space for that too, and like help me educate instead of being like, you don't have to do that. Like, actually, I kind of do.
Yeah, kind of like what I said in the interview with Ryan. Like, I kind of feel forced into being an activist as a trans person. It's not like something I really chose to do. It's something like my existence is being threatened, and if I don't say something, it's going to be a problem for myself and my community of people who are like me. So I completely get that. Like, it's something that a lot of people do want to do, but I am personally one that feels like I have to. It's not necessarily I want to, it's I have to. Yeah, go ahead and popcorn to someone.
Emrys.
Right. I think the thing I would most like people to understand from my perspective is that as someone with a complicated medical history, asking questions of just the whole medical transition. Like, I have experience with doctors and hospitals, and that's not always a thing that is as, it's not the same as it is for, you know, lots and lots of other trans people, and that sometimes is a difficult thing to talk about. I don't know, medical gaslighty trauma nonsense.
Yeah, the medical field is a dumpster fire sometimes.
It's problematic. Yeah.
Very. And the
Oh, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Something that I am constantly reminding myself about my identities is that for me, they're constantly evolving. As I'm growing, I'm discovering a new layer of a particular identity that I wasn't aware or conscious to before. And so with that, I find myself frequently checking in on people, you know, where they are with their identities, whereas I feel like that space isn't held for me at times. And so I feel like I'm seen as like a stagnant identity or group of identities. And I think that that's something that I would like others to know, that are, you know, identities change over time, right? Even if we've transitioned, maybe there's another identity that we've uncovered, and it's just nice to be asked every now and then.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, especially because I know myself and some other people first came out as like trans mask, and then they were like, oh wait, no, we're probably non-binary. So even when you're transitioning, sometimes you transition and you're like, oh, actually, now that I feel more comfortable with myself, I don't know if this is necessarily the perfect label for me. And I know that happens in the queer community as a whole. Like, someone might be like, oh, I'm a lesbian, and they're like, actually, I might be pansexual or bisexual or even asexual. You know, it constantly changes. And I agree. I think we should be checking in with people more, and saying like, hey, is this still what you want to express to me, or is there anything new, or, you know, just little casual check-ins. I love that idea. Does anybody else have anything like specific that they want to add to that? It looks like someone might be interested, but if not, we can move on.
Well, I was just going to say that I, as someone who like lived 40 years in girl mode, it took many, many, many baby steps to get to where I am now over like the past 4 years. So I sort of dipped the toe into non-binary and then go like, so yes, like it's an evolving process. And I may at some point get to the point where I'm like, yeah, no, I actually want to go a bit back more the other way. So just I'm going as much I'm going as far into the masculine direction as I feel comfortable with, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. And that's all you can do. Just keep checking in with yourself. Even if you can't check in with others, be sure to always check in with yourself. We did just get our final panelist joined, so we're going to go ahead and introduce. Hello, go ahead and share name, pronouns, and any identities that you would like to share.
Hi, my name's Nick. My pronouns are he, him.
Awesome. And we are just moving into our next question. We're doing it popcorn style, so after everybody, I pick someone to start the question off, and then they'll popcorn it to the next person. So the next one is, hang on, I lost my thingy. Which communities do you believe are the most overlooked in intersectional conversations? And we'll start with Genesis.
Oh, it's me. Oh, there's so many. I think that the intersex communities get overlooked. I think Romani and traveler communities get overlooked. Physical disability gets overlooked. Neurodivergence gets overlooked. Non-binary trans women and men get overlooked. And finally, Black trans men get overlooked.
Mm.
and yes, these all happen to be identities that I have, so I know from firsthand experience that they get
Yes.
overlooked. Yeah. And the problem with that is, how can you say that you're serving, for example, the trans community if you're not serving its most, overlooked or underprivileged members or parts? You're not really serving the trans community at that point. You're just serving white supremacy, to be quite honest. And that's why, I push for diversity in everything and holding space for people who don't have a voice.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to popcorn this to Nick.
Sorry, I'm still having technical difficulties, apparently. I was trying to unmute myself. I definitely agree with you, Genesis, that, me identifying as a African American trans male myself, I definitely see that section being overlooked. Also, someone that deals with physical disabilities. I have multiple sclerosis, and that gets overlooked a lot. I see that happening. I also want to agree with you that intersex people, they get left out a lot in the conversation. Non-binary people get left out a lot. And I think, including a lot of inclusion will, go a long way with including everyone in this. So yeah, I definitely want to agree with you on that. And I will popcorn it to V.
Hello again. I'm yes to everything Genesis said. Yes to everything Nick said, and little improv skill there. And yes, and I've been working a lot with children and youth over the last decade of my social work practice and as an educator, and something that I had a 20-something-year-old in one of my classes ask a few days ago was, do children have rights? And, we're seeing in Texas specifically, we are hearing a lot more about children's rights as trans and queer youth. But outside of that, it's, there are other intersecting identities of children and youth. It's almost like they're not allowed to have any other identities other than being children or being kids because they don't know themselves yet. So therefore, they're not allowed to have other identities. And so I think that's something that I've been bringing that conversation into the classroom a lot, right? Because I work with a lot of children that are about to age out of the foster care system or in the foster care system. And so that's something that's, forefront of my mind, daily thinking, going into the classroom with where these kids have probably been stripped of their rights for a really long time and haven't had a voice or their own autonomy. And so I would say that's another community that is definitely overlooked. And I will go to Emrys,
who is sitting here as a very pale-skinned white British person going, yeah, you guys have all said way more than I would ever know about, like that's yeah, I don't know.
And that's okay to not know. That's, I think, why these conversations are so important, is so that we can really just know, honestly. It's pretty simple, just so we can be aware of these things. Someone in the comments said, I just wanted to add the need to educate others about ourselves. Personally, I have to educate others, but up to limit that the type of connection would allow. Yeah, educating others about ourselves, and that is one of the things about diversity. It's like humans are inherently diverse people, No two people are exactly the same. You may have like kind of like a soulmate friendship with someone or something, and you feel like you are the same person, but there's always differences. There's always differences. And so I think highlighting our diversity rather than trying to always just fit into the mold of what people want you to be is super important. I also really want to go back to what V said about children. I think I like physically went, whoa, about that. Like, do children have rights? And that's a super important one. I do feel like you're right that like children don't really get the opportunity to like identify as anything. Um, that's definitely something to continue to let simmer in my mind at least. Okay, so this one's kind of fun. I feel like this one could get to be like really long, which is super fine. I am wondering if anyone has any theories or personal observations on connections in your intersectional experience. So, like, are there any surprising overlaps that you might not have expected? And we'll start with Emrys.
Surprising, probably not, but the yeah, I go to doctors for some stuff, and then I go to doctors for other stuff. Yeah,
That's actually a fun overlap. Well, not fun because doctors aren't fun.
And the way that the NHS, for which I am incredibly grateful, Lord knows the NHS is saved. Lord, God's know the NHS is amazing. Well, anyway, to be addressed as Mr. on their systems, I would have to basically have my entire medical history transferred over into a completely different file. And I basically don't trust my GP surgery to do that because they're understaffed and overworked. And and it's the fact that I have this big, huge medical stuff, and I basically need whoever is doing my transition stuff to know about all of this stuff, and I need the people who are dealing with the other stuff to know that I'm transitioning. Those things have to be in contact with each other. So yeah, I am on their system as mix, which is great for people who love it, but I really don't. And it sucks when they have this voice thing in the GP surgery where it will announce me as mixed. It's like, yay, and I kind of go in with my mustache and go, yay, hey, I'm a trans person. Hello, I've just outed myself to the entire GP waiting room. Yay.
Pretty much.
Nick.
Yeah, sorry, you guys. I am just having the worst day today for whatever reason. But we'll blame it on Mercury retrograde. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I see a overlap all the time within like working in the healthcare field. And I'd like to kind of mitigate and close that, and I think that starts with education, you know. I see the lack of education towards like healthcare workers in general when it comes to these different groups of individuals. And, that's something I'm starting in my community, especially with, me going through like a diagnosis here where it could be one diagnosis and the other. And I saw a lack of education within that as well. So it's like, how do we mitigate that? Dealing with someone that's disabled, how do we mitigate that and close that gap so we're able to actually provide a service to these individuals that they actually need? And they're not getting left out. They're not falling through these little gaps in the system where we're falling short and actually helping people, but we're making it more difficult for people. And me being a nurse for 13 years now, I see that all the time in my career where people are just simply being left out. They're falling through the cracks, and it may not be purposely, but it ends up happening. so I think, the healthcare field and actually educating within like people that are disabled and people that are identifying as transgender, even minority groups like African American, um, Latin American individuals. I see that happening where it needs to be more education, and more follow through with that. Um, but yeah, that's my personal observation. And I will roll it over to Genesis.
Great. I was hoping you would, because I also wanted to talk about the intersection of disability and being trans, because I'm a member of two different disability communities that specifically get barred access to transgender medical health care due to stigma and people's ideas about who should or shouldn't access these things. So I'm autistic, and a large portion of autistics are identifying as queer trans, like over 70%. So that might be like a surprising intersection there that a lot of people don't know about. And then I'm also plural, which means that I have dissociative identity disorder. And I'm the host of my system. I actually have a TikTok, if anyone wants to follow me. It's at Diversity Dream, where I talk about all marginalized identities, but I talk probably the most about autism and DID being plural. And especially with DID, there's so much stigma that I pretty much have to present as singular to access care, and there's a real fear that someone might take my medical transgender healthcare away due to my mental health, which I think is so wrong, because if I could point to the number one thing that has improved my mental health care, it's been access to hormones and surgery. And I will popcorn this to V.
Oh my God, yes, HRT, amazing. It's life-saving. Surprising discoveries of my intersecting identities. So I was born in Houston. I'm in Texas, but I was raised in Mexico in a tiny little community, indigenous community of Bama people. And I moved back to Texas when I was around 9 to 10 years old. And so then this assimilation process of shoving my identities into these neat boxes that were acceptable in predominantly white spaces began. And it wasn't until my late 20s that I started to get this calling of like reconnecting with my ancestors and thinking about my childhood and all the indigenous practices that I was surrounded by. And in my 30s, realized I was pansexual, asexual, trans, or I was identifying as agender back then, and polyamorous. And I was like, why do all these discoveries feel so amazing now that I know about these things? And it wasn't until maybe the last 6 years that I started to really study more about the Bame indigenous community, which is what my family is and what I grew up in. And they were communal, they were polyamorous. There was a lot of transness and gender fluidity, and heterosexuality wasn't a thing. And so it just started to click and felt very affirming to know that, right, all of these identities have existed way before colonialism, and how our system here in the US specifically has worked very hard to erase all of those identities for a really long time. And so with that, I invite everyone to, be curious about your indigeneity, because I feel, I do believe everyone comes from an indigenous place somewhere, right? Your ancestors do. And indigeneity may look different for everyone, right? That definition might be different for you, for other people. And so I feel that, just being curious about it, that's where I started. And so I found a lot of surprising things that I did not expect to find at all. And I think that was the last one. Yes.
Has Emrys gone yet? Have you answered this one?
I think Emrys was the first one. Yeah.
Yeah, the question was
Overlap.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I was like,
yes.
yeah. So one of the conversations that happens a little bit later today is with Kellen Bacon, and this question actually came up because of the conversation with them. We got on the topic of intentions and how intentions are placed on us, like whether we know what those intentions are or not by our parents or birth givers, however you want to relate to them. And specifically, we have this theory that those intentions may actually have a interesting effect on who we become. I'm pagan. I totally believe that intentions are everything, especially when you're making something. And so we found it very interesting to theorize about this. And they'll go more into like their identity in that section. But I was saying that I know my parents spoke over me that I would be like a leader. I would be a, this, that, and the other. And I see some of those things coming through, like as I am, growing older, like the intentions that they placed on me, some of them still hold true. And the one that held true for them was they were, I don't really want to tell all of their story because it's theirs to tell, but they were essentially given up by their parents because they were not born a male. And so the intentions were in their mind that their parents wanted them to be a male. And then later, those intentions kind of came true because they ended up transitioning. And so that was kind of where that question came through. I don't know if any of you have anything to add to that. I know that one's kind of like popping on you. That wasn't in the question list, but if anyone has anything that they feel like was spoken onto them by their parents or the people who gave them life, and do you see those kind of coming through as part of your identity by any chance? And it's okay if not.
I do, yeah. Okay, I actually have an interesting story to share. So I identify as being bi-gender. And Dee Dee, come here, you're fine. Sorry, my dog. I identify as being bi-gender, and so for me, I have the experience of being both male and female at the same time, and I'm also intersex. And the interesting story behind that, as far as like my parents' intentions, so like before I was born, my mom was pregnant with a baby boy, and that boy ended up dying as on the day it was born. Like it was born alive, but then it died. And that happened on Christmas Day. And the doctors told my mom that she wouldn't be able to conceive again. But obviously she was. So I was born the next Easter. And so my parents throughout my life were like, "Oh, you're a miracle baby, and you have the spirit of your brother who died," which is kind of creepy and spooky on one hand, but on the other hand, I'm just like, Well, I'm bigender and I'm intersex, so like literally I am male and female at the same time. So maybe that's true. Maybe I did absorb some sort of spiritual essence of my brother who didn't make it.
Wow. Yeah, that's very interesting. I definitely want to like. I feel like I'm gonna ask more people that. But we have a comment. Someone loves you in Genesis.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think there's gonna be. I think there needs to be more conversation about that in the future about like what if you know what was spoken over you like as a kid of what your parents wanted you to be and kind of how that manifested. I can also see it kind of being like a careful what you wish for moment where some people may have become some of those things that their parents wanted them to be, but in a way that they didn't necessarily uh, expect and maybe didn't want. Did anybody else have any stories like that that they wanted to share?
Well, I suppose it's the my understanding of the most common narrative of being trans is you've always known, and you had a really long, spent all of your life, pounding against the system, and then I didn't have that. I grew up in Scotland through the 1980s and 1990s, and like there was absolutely no discussion of any kind of anything of that. So the world told me I was a girl, I had the right parts, and then I grew up to mostly be keen on boys. So I was just kind of, I always used to joke that I was a girl, but I wasn't very good at it.
Yeah.
And it's all of those little, lots of people who, when your egg cracks, suddenly your life makes sense. And yeah, I just was mooching along, doing my best at girl, which wasn't very good. And then the sort of switching off from the world, particularly as someone through COVID, because I was shielding, I was even more cut off from the world and for longer. That gave me the space to go, actually, do I want to do all of that girl stuff? And that was what let me. So yeah, I had 40 plus years of doing the things that the world told me and my parents told me, and yeah, so I am so glad that, like, as shitty as it is to be a kid right now, particularly in the UK with the CAS report and all of that bullshit, like, it's easier to have those conversations. It's not like in the 80s. It was you would occasionally get a one thing in the newspaper about how freaky it was because somebody was having surgery, and that was it. So, and I didn't hate being a girl. I just then have found that actually being a boy was more fun, and could I go and do that?
I think I have a very similar experience to that actually. I don't think I ever hated being a girl. I don't think that was the process. I think a lot of the rhetoric around trans people is that they must hate themselves and they must hate their name and they must hate everything about them. And some people do, and that experience is also extremely valid. Some people do they know from the minute they're born that this is not who they're supposed to be, and they hate everything about it. But I didn't have that experience, and I don't see that talked about as often. I didn't hate being a girl. I didn't hate being female. I don't really hate my body. There are things that I wish I could change about it, like almost everybody else on the planet probably, but just in a little bit of a different way maybe. But I never had that experience of like just straight up hating myself like that. Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I haven't met a whole lot of people who share that experience.
Well, I think I'm just incredibly grateful to all of the people who talked about gender euphoria, because that was what made me realize, was the first time I went out suited and booted with facial hair drawn on, it was like, oh my God, this feels amazing. Can I do this all the time? That was the night my egg broke.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, moving on. How do each of you wish that people approach the topic of intersectionality versus how it is often approached? And it's a two-parter. Do you also agree with the current format of how it is being discussed, or should we be taking different approaches? And let's start with V this time.
Okay, so I completed my master's degree about 3 years ago, and I can say that the amount of time we spent talking about intersectionality and intersectional identities was so, I literally blinked and we were done. It was like, what is happening here? Like, this is literally a space, an academic space, where we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to be a safe space for all people, which includes queer identities, trans identities, of many intersections. And I felt like in a lot of academic spaces, it's a similar experience, because I was speaking to other master social workers from across the states, and it was shocking, honestly, and sad. And I really wish that it wasn't glossed over the way that it is. I feel like intersectional identities should be brought into all different types of studies and educational backgrounds and degrees. Like, it shouldn't just be exclusive to a gender studies major, right? Like, because humans participate everywhere. And I think that would make it a lot safer for everyone to exist as well. So, but yeah, I was shocked at how little we spoke about intersectionality. Yeah, I will pass it on to Emrys.
This is another one that I'm just gonna hold my hands up and go, I don't know. Yeah, there's what I should also point out is that it is now 6:45 where I am. I am not first thing in the morning, and yeah, my brain fog is part of my condition, so I may just sort of phase out, and that's when I'm just going to go next. Genesis, go for it.
I have so much to say. You're fine. But yeah, so my problem, I agree with V. My biggest problem is that when people talk about intersectionality, I feel like they don't really understand the term and they're just using it as a buzzword. And so that's my theory, at least, of why it doesn't get talked about enough, because people just kind of like slap it on there and they think they're good, you know? Like, I hear people saying intersectionality exists and they kind of like snap like that, you know, and then it's done. We're over. We're done talking about it. So I think it's important to understand what intersectionality means, but also how intersectionality should be utilized. Intersectionality, to me, isn't just a theory, it is a tool. It is a tool for interconnectedness. And when we can connect to different communities and different identities, all of those communities and identities will be strengthened. It's kind of like how, you know, in the queer community, there's some talk about, you know, LGB without the T, like let's get rid of the T and just be the LGB. And not only is that erasing our history, but it's also reducing our power. I don't think people who talk about that really understand what they're really asking for. They're asking to make the community smaller and more separate, which divide and conquer, right? That's basically what the conservatives and the bigots want. So when we understand what intersectionality is and how to utilize it, we can strengthen ourselves and everyone around us. Our whole community is going to be invigorated by applying intersectionality in the right way.
Definitely.
And I'm going to popcorn to Nick while he's still here.
Did you get the question, Nick, or should I repeat it?
Yes, please repeat it.
Okay,
I'm so
no
sorry.
worries. No worries. Mercury is in the microwave today, so we've got retrograde issues for sure. So the question was, how do you wish people approach the topic of intersectionality versus how it is often approached? And do you agree with the current format of how it's being discussed?
I wish people would approach it more with an open mind and an open heart, and be more receptive to the topic of learning, being more educated to the issues that we may face, especially if they're coming from a place where they may not have experienced some issues or themselves. I think it's very important to keep an open mind and an open heart, because that leaves you receptive, I think, sorry, I didn't catch, what was the second end to that question?
And then it was, do you agree with the current format of how intersectionality is being discussed?
I think, I will say this, like, we could always do better, right? We could always do better in how we approach it. We can always do better in how we organize things. We can always do better in education. And that's just me speaking from my own personal experience and what I've seen. I think, like, for example, the first thing that, when I got diagnosed with MS, multiple sclerosis, I noticed that, why are LGBTQ individuals being left out? One of my biggest questions was, am I going to have to stop hormones now? There was no research facilitated towards trans individuals. So that was a gap that I wanted to mitigate and to bring closer into where we could be more included in the group of individuals. So I partnered with the MS Foundation to start the first support group for LGBTQ individuals, so they could be more included in that. Let's bridge these gaps that we see, so we can help people get the help that they need. And so others can become more aware of them and advocate towards them. So I will say, I'm so appreciative of the work that's going into it and helping mitigate things, but we could always do better with everything in life, So that's my take on it.
Yeah. We also got someone asking in the comments, who's saying to get rid of the T in LGBT? And Hayes replied, it's a lot of TERFs, trans exclusionists, radical feminists. And there's more people than that. There are, unfortunately, a lot of people in the LGBT community who are, they're just trans exclusionary, even if they're not feminists. They're transphobic, even if they are gay or part of another identity. It looks like Genesis wants to say something.
Yeah, so there's actually a hate organization called LGB without the T. And I believe it's not the only queer hate group that is specifically anti-trans. I can't remember the name of the other one, but there's another one too, unfortunately.
And it's so ridiculous because, I'm queer. Are they just gonna, am I not allowed to go into the gay bit because I'm trans? Not all trans people are straight.
A lot
Yeah.
of trans people aren't
Well, exactly.
straight.
So, like, there's so many of us would be LG or B or Q. Like, yeah.
Exactly. And it's really ridiculous to me. But there are tons of gay people, unfortunately, or bisexual or lesbian, any of the other non-gender identities, all the sexualities. There are tons of people in each of those identities that they're like, oh yeah, like being queer is good, being gay is good, whatever. But when they get to the trans, they just get really confused or standoffish or straight up hateful. And it's unfortunate.
But we've always been here. Sorry. We have always been a part of this community. We have built the queer community. We lifted it on our backs and carried the queer community. Study queer history. We've always been here.
Always. And again, this is something we get into in a later talk, specifically the one with Mars. We talk about history and trans history. And, specifically the Hijra community comes up, which is the world's oldest transgender community in India. And they've been here for, I think it's like 1,000+ years. And it's crazy that people think that this is some new trend or some new like random thing. We got another comment. I wouldn't be surprised to see someone who's trans that is anti-trans.
They exist.
Has anyone seen, I wonder, I think it was Caitlyn Jenner that recently started saying anti-trans stuff, and I was very confused. And Buck Angel, yeah. It's very interesting to see. I think it's less of trans people being anti-trans, and I want to get you guys' opinions. I think it's more of like trans people having a very like strong connection to how they identify and being really like anti anyone doing it differently. It's more of like trans people not believing other people are trans because it's not the same as their experience.
It's very gatekeepery. It's very, we're the right kind of trans. You can't be trans if you haven't done X, Y, Z. Which, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, does anyone have anything else that they want to add to that? Yeah. And Nick. Okay, cool.
Nick can go first. I've been talking a lot.
No, I just want to say, like, when I first got, to the point where I was like, okay, I am transgender. My story really briefly here. I grew up in a very rural area. I was very conservative. I did not know many gay individuals. I don't think I knew any, to be honest, quite frankly. I grew up in a very conservative part of Florida, and when I first realized I could even transition was I was in nursing school, and that's literally how I learned about it. And like for me, I was like, okay, this is my identity. This is, what I want to be. And when I started to open up and try to join like the trans community at the time, this was like way back in like 2009, probably. It was like, I forgot who said it, but they described it as very gatekeepy at times. And like around that time is what I experienced, like, oh, you're not on hormones yet. So it's like, I felt like I did not belong, or at least that's how they made me feel at the time. Like, because I wasn't on hormones, because I hadn't had top surgery yet, I could not be included in that experience, as a trans identifying man. But I want people to know you don't have to ever medically transition to be a trans man, or however you may want to identify. Whatever that gender looks like to you, because I feel like gender is a spectrum. It can be so complicated in that way, and you don't even have to put words to it, to be honest. Me myself, I'm going through a questioning phase of my life. Like, am I even like want to continue to identify as a trans man, because I'm leaning more towards being non-binary now, to be honest. And you know, like being open to all pronouns as well, you know, which, you know, for me is different, but that's where it comes in. Gender can be a spectrum, and it can actually like change over time as well, and that's what's currently happening to me. So I wanted people to know that, like, you never have to medically transition. You don't have to fit a mold or a box someone else has projected over you. You don't have to do that. And that's what I felt victim of in the beginning of my transition. And it made me go down a path where I felt like I wasn't a good enough trans man because I did not present a certain way of how other people had also like start to project their own self identity onto others in the community. So I think that's important that, you know, first that we don't project our self identity, because every transition or um, everyone else's gender is going to be exclusive to them, you know, and how they try to understand it and try to outwardly portray that gender identity, you know, and it does not have to meet anyone's standards, you know, and like I said before, it can change over time, and that's okay, you know. So yeah, I just want to put that in.
Okay, and I wanted to just really quick say that there's a strange intersection. There's an intersection between trans people who are turfy and trans medicalism, which I think is what Nick was kind of talking about and touching on. Trans medicalism, trans medicalists are people who think that you have to medically transition, and often medically transition in a certain way to be really trans or a true trans. And I think it's rooted in internalized transphobia and also just fear of the other. It's really sad though, because I mean, that is what cis people who are anti-trans perpetrate against all of us, right? Like, they invalidate our identities. And it's sad when our own community does that to us. But I do think that turf ideology intersects with trans medicalism a lot.
It's unfortunate. I fell into that hole when I first started transitioning of trans medicalism, and it was the only voice that I was hearing. So it was a very loud voice, and so it made sense to me at the time. And as time went on, I realized it wasn't very like by nature. Of course, it's not inclusive, but it's also not inclusive of like anything besides the binary, which is really interesting to me that even trans people want to hold so strongly to this binary. Like it's very confusing to me for sure. Um yeah, it's I completely agree with it, what you both said. Um, we're going to move on to the next question. Before we do so, we will have a little time for questions at the end of this. If anybody has any questions that they want to ask any of the panelists by the end of this, just go ahead and start leaving those comments now. Panelists, you do have the option, and if you do not want to answer a question, you do not have to, but leaving that open in case you do actually want to answer some of the questions. So next one for me, how does your intersectionality come across to family, friends, coworkers, and do you discuss it often, or like are you open about it, or do you kind of keep that more confidential, stealth as we say sometimes? And let's start with Nick.
Yeah, for me, you know, personally, I had people in my family that was very open and very adaptive to my, you know, gender identity. And then I had individuals that were more conservative towards it, you know. they were very religious based, and so they were kind of like set in their it was kind of like already set in firmly in their minds, their belief system. As far as like co-workers, I never had a problem with work. People were really adaptive to me transitioning, and when I came out, everyone was super supportive. I will say over time that people got to the point where they kind of adapted with the change, because that was me like setting a boundary with them. I got to a point where it's like, okay, like enough is enough. I have to set a boundary with these individuals. And then, they became more receptive to the change. I think, for me, it was hard because I just wanted acceptance, for who I was, who I am and who I continue to identify as, and what that may look like for me, even in the future if it changes. I just simply want acceptance. So yeah, that was kind of my experience. I think, for anyone that's listening that may want to help someone that's going through that, I think the biggest thing here is to listen and be supportive. So yeah, I'll popcorn it to, let's see, V.
Ooh, this one's a hard one for me to reflect on. But I will say that the safest place where I have felt to be my most authentic self to even speak about all my different identities is my place of work. And even had very vocal advocates whenever I was being misgendered. And that was really validating. It felt very safe for me to be at work, which is why I spent a lot of time there. And, unfortunately, in my case, I don't have a lot of familial support, if any. And a lot of my friends did struggle with, me discussing my identities, and had to set some boundaries and end some friendships, and had to go no contact with a lot of my family. But I was very surprised to find people that were very loving and caring and respectful and vocal advocates at work. Mm-hmm. I will pop it over to Genesis.
Right. So when I came out as trans, I actually ended up losing like all of my oldest friends. I was kicked out of my housing. And that is, in my opinion, directly because of the intersection of anti-transness and anti-Blackness. I live in a very white area, and I was the Black friend in my friend group. And when I came out, it was like night and day how they were treating me as like an aggressor. Which, look at me, do I look like an aggressor? Like, let's be real. But and then later, when I came out as being plural, having DID, I lost some friends again over that. And I've just learned that there's always going to be like a shedding process when you are coming out as whatever identity. There's always going to be somebody who doesn't agree with it or doesn't want to hold space for it. And so I've learned to really cherish my chosen friends and family, and just let people go who don't want to be present for who I am. As far as like what community I feel the most myself in, and like I can have all of my identities be present at once. For me right now, it's my TikTok community, my channel at Diversity Dream. I have built such a welcoming community that is based off of diversity and inclusion. And it's where all my best friends are right now, and it's where I can be my most authentic self, and it's really beautiful. And I just hope to spread it and build it and bring it into the real world someday. Emrys.
Yeah. I mean, it's fairly obvious to people who are seeing, like, at the moment I'm sitting on my bed and that's fine, but like out in the world I'm in a wheelchair, or whenever I stand up I have a crutch, so I'm, you know, like fairly obviously disabled and have been so for a good number of years. So it's like I was the disabled person, and then I became the trans disabled person, and yeah, so I have no choice but to, you know, have the questions and like, and in some respects I know that having a visible disability is a lot easier than an invisibility. Invisible disability. I swear to God, this is non-alcoholic. Look, it's alcohol free. But words. Yeah, I have had 6 months of no contact with my family. I'm very tentatively, hopefully making tiny baby steps to maybe. But yeah, it's the I have some very lovely friends, and yeah, like, so question next. Sorry.
Yeah, this one again was not on the list, but I wanted to ask, what are some questions that each of you may get about some of your intersecting identities that, like, you can either share a few that you wish you were asked more often, or something that you wish no one would ever ask again, and you don't have to answer it here, just like something that you wish people would just stop asking. Or maybe some funny questions you've gotten that are like, why would you think that? I'll give you a couple of seconds to think it over, and it's just like picking someone to start in case they don't have one. You can just raise your hand and we'll go from there. Nick.
I will say, like, for me, as someone that's, newly using like a mobility aid, I'm using a walker right now. And I think the biggest struggle for me is like the looks that people give you. Like, you're young and why are you using a mobility aid? And it's almost like a judgment type look. I don't want to assume, but it's like that judgy type look. And maybe Emrys will know what I'm talking about when I say that. And that was something that, took me a while to get used to. Also, like, switching from being a nurse to a patient, like strictly a patient, and from a patient perspective instead of a nurse perspective, that took time for me as well. But yeah, I went through like that phase, here recently.
Does anyone else have any questions they would like to share? I know one that I got, and this isn't really about being trans, but there was a silly one. I was homeschooled my entire life, and I got questioned multiple times by people who went to a public school. Do you wear a helmet inside? I guess the perpetuating idea was that like homeschoolers were always like overprotected, which isn't necessarily inaccurate. But more than once, I was asked if I wear a helmet inside, and I think back to like that one quote. What is it? If I had a nickel for every time someone asked me this question, I would have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. Yeah, so that was kind of a funny one. I don't really get weird questions about being trans myself personally, but That was just a funny one I happened to think of. Genesis.
I feel like a lot of trans people could relate to this, but as an intersex person, I've had people ask me what is in my pants my entire life, like from a very inappropriately young age. Pretty much as soon as anyone found out I was intersex, that was the first question they would ask me. I don't think I need to explain to anyone here why that is inappropriate, but um, I've experienced this with some of my other identities as well. I wish people would stop asking questions that are pathologizing, that are like clinical, and start getting curious about our lived experiences. I wish people would ask me, what has your life been like as an intersex person? What is your struggle as an autistic trans person? You know, like, what's it like existing in Black spaces as a trans person or in trans spaces as a Black person? These are the questions that people need to be asking, in my opinion.
Emrys.
Yeah, it's just this constant need to know things about other people's bodies that I definitely do not understand. Like, I get asked by strangers why I'm in a wheelchair. Like, I mean, yes, you can wonder, but you do not ask somebody on the bus to share like private medical information that may relate to very traumatic experiences just because you're nosy. Like, little kids, absolutely fine. I will talk to little children because that's just curiosity. But when grown adults will say, "Oh, and so why are you in that?" Or, because I can't walk without it. Next question. And yes, that whole, so it's just this obsession. Yeah, like Jenna said, the obsession with bodies. I don't get it. I mean, bodies are lovely. They're wonderful. I'm glad we have them. I have a interesting relationship with mine. I'm way more interested in people's brains, and they're yes, like you said, their lived experience, their personness. Yes.
I will say that's one that I have been asked. Specifically, it actually wasn't me. It's a very brief story, but I worked in retail for a while. I know, it sucks. Worked at retail, but there was a coworker who was a part of the queer community and was proudly and openly so, and wore like a rainbow bracelet all the time. And we were both working in checkout lanes. They were in front of me, and some customer, I didn't hear it, but some customer apparently asked them what bathroom I use. This is not someone I have ever interacted with. And the coworker, when telling me that, was laughing like it was funny. And I was like, what? This is not funny. This is horrendous. Why would someone ask this? And why would you be laughing about it? And like, and also, why didn't the person just ask me? Like, if they were going to have that nosy question, why did they ask someone else? I don't know. It was just bizarre. And people feeling entitled to that type of information, I feel like is something that most trans people experience, and probably most intersex people as well, to different degrees on both sides and with varying personal questions. Yeah, that was a very interesting one. What would each of you say, and I think this is our last question before we start to close out, what would you consider to be one of the hardest parts about holding multiple identities, and what is the best part? And we'll start with Emrys.
Okay, the best part so far is that, I mean, I've been using unisex bathrooms for a decade, and so I don't have that thing of, I don't want to go in a men's room, they smell. I mean, guys' bathrooms are gross. But so yes, that thing. So it's like a superpower. I can just go and open. I have a radar key. I can I open the accessible bathroom, and also when looking at Packers, I don't need to get a stand to pee because I wouldn't be able to anyway.
Yeah.
So, and I think the saddest thing, as far as I can tell, is that that I will probably never be able to have top surgery because I rely on my upper body to move around, either on crutches or in a wheelchair, and that I have been told is probably not going to make that possible, and that really sucks. It's that thing of, there are things one can do to one's body when it's in perfect health, and then there are things that are not possible for, when it's not. And that sucks, because I am yet to find a way that these tracts of land are vast, how to frame, and how I finagle them into a position that feels comfortable to me is still a work in progress. But I do get to pee in unisex toilets.
That's always nice. Yeah, go ahead and popcorn to someone.
V.
So I think the best part about holding multiple identities is, going back to one of the first questions, was that I'm constantly discovering new things about my identities that are very exciting to me, and excited that I have a few group of friends that I can share those insights and discoveries with, and they like to celebrate me when I make those discoveries, and that's just a really just awesome thing, right, that I just didn't experience before identifying as non-binary or trans. And so I often feel like there's always something to celebrate. And I have a very lovely community that is very open to celebrating those discoveries with me. So that is the best part for me. One of the hard parts for me is that I wish I could share these discoveries with my family, and I can't do that, not now. I still have some hope that maybe in the future that could change, but and mostly because I'm learning a lot about the Indigenous community that my family belongs to, and I can't share those things with them either. And I often wonder how their lives would look now if they had access to that knowledge. So there's a lot of daydreaming involved in that aspect, but also, some counter, daydreaming and nostalgia and some sadness, but also balanced out with some celebration and joy on the other end. I will popcorn over to Nick.
Yeah, I think, the hardest part with holding these different identities is just, for me personally, feeling misunderstood, and not feeling like I'm able to personally voice everything I'm going through with like people around me that would completely understand what I'm going through. I think one of the best parts about holding these different identities would definitely be like the advocacy work that comes along with it, with bringing more awareness to these different identities I fall under. I think that it opens up a huge change for the world. Like before I did this, I did a lot of humanitarian work within nursing, or I would go to different marginalized areas and try to help. And I kind of like, after being diagnosed, I had to kind of slow down. And now, I'm trying to bring that advocacy part of myself into this, or it's bringing more awareness to these different groups that need that, that need that voice that maybe they don't have in that direct moment to speak for themselves. So I would say that's the biggest joy in having these different um, areas that I identify with. So yeah, I'll popcorn it to Genesis.
So the hardest part about holding multiple minority identities for me is that people want you to pick and choose, and they discredit any identity that they don't understand. In my experience, so that's kind of hard. A lot of people don't know how to hold space for so many identities at once. And I wish people would work on building up that muscle because it is a skill. That's all it is. Holding space is a skill. The easiest or I guess, best part about holding so many different identities is that I feel like I can relate to so many people and hold space for them. And so a lot of my work, I take on kind of like a a mediator role in a lot of spaces, and I can be an ambassador in a lot of spaces, and I feel truly blessed and lucky to be able to do that.
I would say, kind of to echo off of what Nick definitely touched on. Um, Mine was context. The hardest part for me is context. I wish that most of the friends that I had had when I was in middle school, high school, I mentioned I was homeschooled. We kind of knew each other our whole lives through most of the programs. And I wish those people that I was so close to could continue to see me how I am today. One of my favorite things to do is like reminisce on like fun things that happened back in like high school or middle school. And so having those connection with those people who knew me then and can relate to those memories because they were there is super important. But a lot of times those people are not very accepting of who I am today because homeschooling is very religious based, usually, especially where I was. It was all religious, and so there's some things there. But I will say the best part has been the community that I built since then. The community of you guys and of the people watching and um, everyone I have met since I have started to transition, and all of the lessons I've learned has been phenomenal, and I would not change that for anything.
God,
And
mine feel incredibly selfish now. You guys have all talked about community and lovely things, and I've been like, yeah, I could pee and I can't do that.
No, but that's good too. It's good to hear all of the different perspectives. That's why we got a panel.
Okay.
I'm gonna open this up. We have maybe 2 or 3 minutes left, so keep it brief. But if anyone wants to have any like last words, anything else they want to share quickly before we close this, and go ahead and share how everyone can find you as well, if they want to see more of your work or anything like that. Oh yeah, let's start with Nick.
Yeah, I'll close this by saying, one of the biggest things I learned throughout this entire journey of finding who I am was to ultimately love myself. And I know that can be hard in so many different moments of your life where you're just feeling down, but you always come back to having yourself, And I know, like, as individuals, we like to have a group of, as humans, we like to have a group of individuals around us that we love and support each other. But I always, at the end of the day, I always go back to within myself, you know? And, you know, whether that's with like affirmative talk, like affirmations, or just, you know, writing it down, you know, and just remind myself throughout the day that, you know, I always will have myself at the end of the day and that I am enough, you know. Um, so, yeah, and I am One Dope Nurse on most of my social media. You guys can follow me there and reach out to me and DM me if you need anything. So, and I also want to say thank you for having me today. And thank you for dealing with my tech difficulties.
No worries. Yeah, go ahead and popcorn.
I will popcorn it to, let me see, Emrys.
I'm an old fart, and I am only really on Instagram. So and it's Emrys D Jones 78, because I'm also very lacking in imagination for usernames. I'm not on TikTok because I'm too old for that. I'm nearly 46.
No, you're not.
No, it's
Come
great.
join us.
It's great. It's slightly overwhelming for my brain. So, you know, I love it's there, and I love the communities, but yeah, it's a bit too much for me. I think, yes, thank you for having me. Thank you to Caden, who, like, I follow on Instagram and who had found me, like, and yeah, I think just being aware. I would just really like it if everybody was just more aware of the possibility of just the possibility that there might be things you don't know about someone, that, you know, there might be things that you probably should hold space for, to be aware of the possibility of. Just it's thoughtlessness really, really boils my piss, and I just wish people thought a bit more.
I love that
Yeah.
phrase.
Oh, I'm Scottish. We swear with relish and a wide vocabulary. So I will pop that to Genesis.
Okay, yeah. In closing, I will just say that what I want people to take away about intersectionality is that it's not a hindrance, it's not a buzzword, it's not any one thing. It is about diversity and inclusion, and honestly, it's a superpower. I want people to think of intersectionality as your personal superpower. Every time you learn about another human being's experience, think of it as like catching a Pokemon, okay? You gotta catch them all. Yeah, right. And you can find me on TikTok and Instagram at Diversity Dream. And I would love to have you be a part of my beautiful rainbow community.
Definitely. And
Yeah.
Yeah, I was looking for the mute button. I also, Nick, I feel you. Also, I just want to say, the word popcorn has been floating around so much that now I want some popcorn really badly.
same.
Like, snacks. It's snack time. Popcorn. So I would like to, closing words, offer what Genesis was saying, right? Intersectionality, something to take away. I love what Genesis said. And what I would like to offer is a skill in how to maybe grow your intersectionality capacity muscle, is to stay in a space of curiosity. A lot of times, even when I'm meeting someone with identities that I've never encountered before, I may have a strong reaction or like, whoa, right? And remind myself that I need to stay in a space of curiosity as well. Right? If someone is sharing something about their own experience or their passion or the interest or how they understand something, if I have a strong reaction towards that, I need to remind myself that I need to stay in a space of curiosity, because maybe I'm not hearing it or understanding it the way that they're wanting it to come across. So, and you can follow me on Instagram at HeyVOK. You can follow me on TikTok. My TikTok and Instagram are, the content is different on both of those. So the TikTok one is more my journey, my transition journey, what I've experienced so far. And I share specifically about that on there. And then my Instagram is more personal, day-to-day stuff, the type of community work that I'm doing as a social worker. And I will be moving to Mexico by the end of the year, and so I'll probably be highlighting lots of that stuff, trying to move my dog Took and I down there. So depending on how much capacity you have, feel free to check either one of those out and follow along. And thank you so much for inviting me to be here. I am just in awe of everyone here, everyone's story. I think you all are amazing and beautiful and wonderful, and I will be following all of you on your socials.
Absolutely.
And was that everyone? Yes, I think that was everyone.
I think
Right?
so.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining. I'm glad you all had fun, and I'm glad you all were able to make it. This has been great. I'm also, I'm going to echo what V said. I'm also in awe of all of you. I'm so happy to have gotten the chance to speak with each of you. And this is not the last time, for sure. We'll talk more. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you all for joining. And it looks like we didn't really get any comment questions, so I think that's going to be it. But thank you again so much. And we're going to move on to the next segment. So stick around.